Hi, my name is Thalassa. My sister once called me a useless wife in front of her friends, then kicked me out of the house we were both raised in. But that was just the start. They rewrote my father's will, used my face to sell a lie, and told the hospital I didn't exist. It wasn't the insult that broke me. It was how far they planned to erase me before I ever noticed. What kind of family quietly deletes you from your own life and smiles while doing it? Spring evenings in Santa Rosa always carried a strange quiet, too calm for how loud my thoughts could be. That night, I stood in front of the bedroom mirror, slipping into a plain navy dress I'd pulled from the back of my closet. It had been years since I'd worn it, maybe longer. The fabric clung too tightly around my shoulders, and no amount of adjusting made it feel like mine. Celine had invited me to her company's annual Women of Impact Awards. "You'll be around people who matter," she'd said. "It's a great networking chance. Just try not to dress like you're heading to jury duty, okay?" Her words stung more than I let on, but this invitation felt different. For once, I wasn't being excluded. Maybe she saw me. I pulled my hair into a bun, slipped into my modest flats, and told myself, it's not about how I look, it's about showing up. The event was held at the Crystal Grove Hall, a high-ceilinged venue lined with fairy lights and champagne flutes. When I stepped through the doors, I was hit with a rush of perfume, laughter, and clinking glass. Women with sleek blowouts and heels sharp enough to cut marble floated across the room. Their conversations came in bursts, name drops, firm handshakes, and effortless compliments. I stood near the back, unsure of where to go or what to do. That's when Celine spotted me. She didn't smile, no warm wave, just a nod. She walked over briskly, holding a tray of hors d'oeuvres. "Hey," she said flatly, "we're short-staffed. Can you help pass these around until we get the servers settled?" I blinked. "Sorry, what?" "Just for a bit," she whispered, pressing the tray into my hands. "Don't make a scene, Thalassa. Some women get honored, some just help. Don't embarrass me." She turned and disappeared into the crowd. For a moment, I stood frozen, holding the silver tray like it weighed 50 pounds. Then, without much thought, I moved through the room, offering stuffed mushrooms and goat cheese tartlets to people who barely noticed I was there. At first, I told myself it was just temporary, just a momentary need, a misunderstanding. But it wasn't. Halfway through the evening, Celine took the stage. Spotlights hit her face like she was born under them. "Tonight is about celebrating strong women," she said, her voice crisp and clear. "And while I may be the one up here, I wouldn't be standing without the silent support of family who choose to stay out of the spotlight." She glanced right at me. A man near the front leaned over and whispered to someone else. "Is that her assistant?" "No," the woman chuckled, sipping her wine. "That's her sister, the one she calls the useless wife." My breath caught. My grip tightened around the tray. I didn't cry. I didn't run. I kept walking in circles with the damn tray until the speeches ended and the crowd started thinning. That phrase, useless wife, echoed louder than the microphone. It wasn't new. I remembered Celine saying it once years ago during a fight. But hearing strangers repeat it like gossip at a salon was something else entirely. This wasn't an accident. It was staged, orchestrated. Later, as the room emptied and staff collected glasses, Celine approached me again, this time glowing under the flash of someone's camera. "Don't ruin this night for me," she said between clenched teeth. "Just smile." I smiled. I smiled like a woman who had nothing left to lose. And that's when I saw him. Dorian. Standing by the door in a gray suit I didn't recognize. He hadn't aged much, just looked sharper, colder. I hadn't seen Dorian in over 5 years, and the timing couldn't have been worse. I left the event early. I didn't say goodbye to anyone. No one noticed. When I got home, I dropped my keys into the dish by the door and stood in the hallway for a moment, not moving. The walls of the house felt thinner somehow, like they knew something I didn't. I didn't turn on the lights. I walked to the kitchen, filled the kettle, and sat at the table in the dim glow from the porch bulb leaking through the window. My dress still clung to my skin, but I didn't care. I kept replaying that phrase, useless wife. The ease with which it rolled off that woman's tongue, like it had been passed around a few too many times. Celine hadn't just called me that once. She'd made it a part of my identity and handed it to strangers as a punchline. The next morning, the sun came up like it always does, indifferent to what broke the night before. I poured myself a cup of weak coffee and leaned against the counter. I remembered something my father used to say whenever things got rough between us. "You'll always have your place in this home, Thalassa." I wasn't so sure anymore. I left the kitchen and walked down the hallway to the back room, the one where we used to keep files, letters, old receipts and folders no one had touched in years. I wasn't looking for anything specific. I think I just needed proof that I still belonged in something. There, wedged behind a stack of tax documents, was a folder marked, "Final copy, Dad's will." I felt my chest tighten as I pulled it out. I had a copy somewhere else, from 3 years back, when we all sat in that lawyer's office before his health really declined. I opened the pages, eyes skimming quickly. Something didn't sit right. My name wasn't there. I flipped back. Again. No mention, no clause, not even a footnote. Celine. She had been staying with him those last few months, playing nurse, bringing him meals, making him laugh when he didn't have the strength to lift his head. I hadn't thought much of it at the time, just that maybe she was finally showing up. But now I could see it for what it was. She wasn't serving, she was staging. The betrayal wrapped itself around my ribs like a snake. I sat down on the floor, papers scattered across my lap. Images came rushing back. Me waking up at 3 a.m. to change his sheets, feeding him Ensure when he couldn't chew, calling nurses when his blood pressure dropped. I had done the caregiving, the work that doesn't get written into wills, the kind that leaves you hollow but close. And now? They'd written me out like I'd never been part of it at all. It wasn't just the legal erasure, it was the emotional rewrite. They didn't forget me. They removed me. Later that afternoon, while scrolling through email, I saw a message from Tanya, an old college friend. The subject line, "Have you seen this?" Attached was a photo from a glossy magazine spread. There was Celine, in one of her fitted cream blazers, standing in front of the family home. The caption beneath the headline read, "From Ground Zero to Legacy, One Woman's Solo Journey." The article quoted her, "I built everything from scratch. I'm not like some people who cling to handouts. I worked for this." I stared at the screen. I hadn't asked for credit. I hadn't asked for praise. But this was public theft. I clicked on the comments. Strangers were cheering her on. "So inspiring. True hustle. No room for leeches at the top." One even wrote, "Always one family member trying to ride coattails, huh?" My phone buzzed again. This time, it was a recruiter I had spoken to the previous week. The message was polite, stiff. "We regret to inform you that we'll be moving forward with other candidates at this time. Thank you for your interest." No explanation, just silence where a conversation had once begun. I closed my laptop and pushed it aside, my hands strangely steady. This wasn't just sibling rivalry. This wasn't one insult or one event. This was architecture, calculated, meticulous character assassination, and it was working. But if Celine thought I was going to let her build her empire on my silence, she didn't know me as well as she thought. I reached for an old leather-bound notebook in the drawer beside me. I flipped to a clean page. I wrote, "Proof, names, documents, patterns." Then I paused, took a breath. They want to erase me? I pressed the pen harder. Let's see how they handle receipts. The town square always felt a little too small when your name started making its way around in whispers. I sat outside Bennett's Cafe the next morning, my coffee cooling in the spring air. A few familiar faces passed by, offering tight-lipped smiles or quick glances that slid right past me, as if greeting a shadow they couldn't place. I wasn't imagining it. Whatever Celine had fed them, it was working. The worst part? None of them asked me anything. They already had the version they preferred. The one where I was bitter, dependent, jealous. The one where she was the heroine who climbed her way up despite the weight dragging her down. Me. I didn't finish the coffee. I walked home, cutting through the alley between the library and the consignment shop. Once inside, I went straight to the living room closet. There was an old photo album in there, blue leather, frayed edges. My mother used to call it the family spine. That morning, I was ready to see how crooked it had become. As I flipped through the pages, a memory crashed over me. My father's memorial 2 years back. I'd worn a navy blouse that day, too. The same one Celine said made me look overly formal for a support role. Support role. That had been her phrase of choice for everything she didn't want to share. She stood at the podium, sleek and rehearsed, delivering the kind of eulogy that earns polite nods and silent tears. She thanked our uncle for flying in. She acknowledged our cousins who couldn't attend. She praised the caregivers who stood by Dad to the end. But not once did she say my name. Afterward, someone patted my shoulder and said, "It was so kind of you to help out, dear. Are you a cousin from out of state?" I had smiled, said nothing, helped clean up the folding chairs like it was any other family picnic. Now, sitting on the floor with the album open in my lap, I realized that moment wasn't an oversight. It was a rehearsal. That was the beginning of my quiet erasure. I kept flipping. Christmas photos, birthdays, graduations. Then I saw it. An image from our last Christmas together at the old house. We had all been there. I remembered the itchy green sweater, the overcooked turkey, the way my mother's laughter had faded the moment Celine started talking over her. The photo on the page didn't match my memory. It had been posted on Celine's Instagram, framed and printed. There she was, front and center, arms around our brother and his kids. Our mother sat to the right, laughing mid-sentence. The couch was full, except I wasn't there. No, I had been there that day. I sat on the far left corner of that couch, holding a mug of cider, one leg tucked under me. But in this print, I had been cropped out, literally. The edit was seamless. Unless you knew what was missing, you wouldn't question it. The comments below praised her tight-knit family and beautiful traditions. I stared at the edge of the photo. I could still see the seam of the cushion where I had been sitting. I reached out and touched that spot on the page, as if tracing the outline of a ghost. "They erased me in pixels," I muttered, heart hammering. "But I remember the raw version." I went to my phone and opened the folder of photos I'd taken that same day. There it was. Me, slightly blurry, half laughing at something my nephew had said. Whole. Present. Real. I saved it to a new folder and wrote under it, "Proof number 6. Photo comparison." There was something brutal about being erased so surgically, but there was also something powerful in knowing you hadn't disappeared. You had simply been edited out. I stood, closed the album, and walked into the hallway. The old family portrait still hung by the staircase, taken when I was 13, braces and all. I stared at my own face in that faded image. Not proud, not angry, just certain. "If you won't give me a name," I whispered, "I'll make one louder than yours." The day I opened the drawer, everything changed. Not just because I found out what they'd taken from me, but because I realized how carefully they'd planned it. Nothing was accidental. Not the magazine quote, not the missing photo, and certainly not what happened 3 months before. On a rainy Sunday afternoon. I remember the knock. Just one, soft, almost polite. Celine didn't wait for a reply. She stepped into my room, holding a blue folder and that same voice she used with servers and junior associates. "We're filing paperwork for the city," she said, brushing her damp bangs from her face. "Zoning permits for the remodel. They just need your signature to keep everything clean. You don't lose anything." I looked up from the book I wasn't really reading. "Do I need to read it first?" She exhaled. Just loud enough to register, just quiet enough to deny. It's boilerplate, Thalassa. Don't overthink it. We're doing this for all of us. The way she said we made me hesitate. But I didn't push back. I never did. I signed, handed the pen back, and she left just as quickly, muttering something about traffic and needing to pick up wine. Now, months later, I sat in the kitchen with the document spread out in front of me. The same one I'd signed without reading. My hands were steady, but my stomach turned with every line I read. It wasn't about zoning. It wasn't even about renovations. It was a waiver. A complete, binding waiver of my rights to residency, inheritance, or any future claim to the property. I had signed away my name, my history, my seat at the table, and she'd made it look like a favor. I closed the folder slowly, like it might bite. The rain outside matched the memory too well. I stared through the window for what must have been an hour. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just sat there with silence swelling in my chest like a balloon. Then I whispered to myself, that was the last signature they'll get from me. A few days later, Selene invited me to a charity brunch. You should come, she said brightly over the phone. It'll be good for you to be seen again. That phrase, it felt like a leash made of velvet. I went. I don't know why. Maybe I needed to see how far she'd go. The event was held at the Westmont Country Club. White tablecloths, linen napkins, mimosas that never stopped flowing. The kind of place where appearances are currency. Selene was in full campaign mode, working the room like a senator. When she saw me arrive, her smile tightened, but didn't falter. Thalassa, she called out, waving me over. Everyone, this is Thalassa. She's been like family to us for years. A ripple of confusion moved across the faces around the table. One woman I vaguely recognized raised her eyebrows. Another leaned closer to her friend and whispered, Isn't she her sister? Selene laughed lightly, dismissively. Oh, I meant emotionally. We're not blood close. There was no mistaking the sharpness in her voice, like she'd planted a flag in front of me and dared me to touch it. I smiled, just like she taught me to. And then I excused myself, walked calmly to the parking lot, and got into my car. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I opened my phone, hit record, and spoke clearly into the microphone. They want me out, but I'm still here, and now I've got paper too. I sat for a while in the driver's seat, watching the rain collect along the windshield. The same rain that had once made that Sunday feel so ordinary. Then I pulled up my contacts and scrolled down until I found Mark's name, an old friend who now worked as a paralegal. When he picked up, I didn't waste time. I think I signed my future away. There was a pause on the line, and then his voice came through low and steady. Then let's see what they missed. I didn't know it yet, but the moment I made that call, the game began to shift. Not all at once, not dramatically, but the air around me changed. I started cataloging everything, not because I was paranoid, but because now I understood. This was a pattern, not a mistake. My birthday came quietly. No texts from Selene, no dinner plans, no card from our mother. Just another Thursday with a leftover sandwich and the dull buzz of being forgotten. That evening, I scrolled through Instagram, not expecting anything good. And there it was. A photo of our mother wearing a pearl necklace. Selene stood beside her, wine glass raised, captioned, Family first. Some bonds you don't have to explain. That necklace, I had bought it. Weeks earlier. I'd used a gift service that delivered anonymously. I'd even paid extra for the handwritten note, something small and personal, for all the strength you gave me when no one else saw it. I hadn't wanted credit, just connection. Selene took the photo. She took the moment. And she let the world believe it was hers. The comments flooded in. Such a beautiful daughter. What a thoughtful gift. You're the kind of family people dream about. I didn't confront her. I didn't say a word. I just opened my folder, turned to the growing timeline of thefts and lies, and added, Proof number 9, handwriting mismatch. It wasn't the necklace that hurt. It was how effortlessly she took something kind and made it performative, like she could harvest my sincerity and use it as her brand. That night, I sat on the edge of my bed, recalling something Celine once told me at a Thanksgiving table. Years ago, after I had gently corrected her about a story she'd exaggerated in front of guests. "It's not classy to make a fuss about gifts," she'd whispered, leaning in with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. I didn't make a fuss. Not then. Not now. Instead, I updated my resume and began applying to jobs outside Sonoma County. New cities, new starts, somewhere she couldn't rewrite me. A few days later, I got an interview request from a nonprofit in Sacramento. We spoke over Zoom. It went well. I followed up, sent my references. Then, silence. The recruiter called late on a Tuesday. His tone was clipped, apologetic. "I'm really sorry, Ms. Marin," he said. "We've decided to move in a different direction." I waited. Let the air fill the space he didn't. "There was a document sent anonymously," he finally said. "An incident report. It raised some concerns about emotional stability and boundary issues. I can't go into detail." I asked him to forward the message. When it arrived, my stomach turned. The report looked official enough. My full name, dated 2 weeks prior, typed on a blank template. But the signature at the bottom wasn't mine. The email it was sent from? My old shared Gmail account, the one Celine and I used when we organized Dad's hospice care. I knew that account had access to some of my older medical files, notes from counseling during Dad's illness. Nothing dramatic, just documentation of someone trying to survive caregiving, but twisted out of context, it read like a warning label. She didn't just want me gone, she wanted me unemployable. I didn't panic, I didn't spiral. I went to the public library, found a quiet corner with a working scanner, and began collecting. Screenshots, timestamps, metadata. I documented the trail back to the IP address that had accessed the Gmail. I included the gift note handwriting comparison, the eulogy edits, the will discrepancies. "You want character assassination?" I whispered, saving each file. "Here's the autopsy report." Back at home, I opened the drawer where my evidence folder lived and added a new tab. The label read, "Celine, Civil Pattern, Possible Malice. Begin Countermeasure Phase 1. The next morning, I left the library with a grocery bag slung over one arm and a flash drive zipped into the pocket of my coat. It wasn't even 9 o'clock yet. I had plans to spend the day reviewing files, maybe finally eat something warm, and sit with the quiet I'd earned. I turned the corner onto our street and slowed as I approached the house. It didn't feel like mine anymore, but the shape of it still tugged at something inside me, like the echo of a song I'd once known by heart. I walked up the front steps and keyed in the door code. It blinked red. I tried again. Red. On the third attempt, a chirp sounded, followed by Celine's voice, her real-time voice, coming through the video doorbell. "You've been tense lately," she said sweetly, like a mother speaking to a toddler mid-tantrum. "Maybe take a few days to cool off. We'll talk when you're feeling less aggressive." I didn't respond. The grocery bag slipped from my fingers. Apples rolled down the porch. One cracked open on the concrete. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just sat on the top step and breathed. Cars passed. The world moved on. I stayed. Every moment they made me feel grateful to be included came back like a storm. Quiet dinners I'd been invited to last minute. Holidays where I was the bonus guest. Emails where my name was CC'd instead of to. Celine had trained me to accept crumbs and call it generosity. Not anymore. I pulled out my phone and texted Molly, an old friend who lived 10 minutes away. "Locked out. Can I crash?" Her reply came fast. "I'm on my way. Bring the apples if they're still alive." 10 minutes later, I was in her car, warm coffee in my hands and my head leaning against the window. She didn't ask questions. That was our friendship. No performance, just space. By the time we reached her apartment, I'd already tried logging into the Wi-Fi account I used at home. It failed. Same with the streaming platforms, Netflix, Hulu, HBO. Passwords were changed. Even the utility account showed an error message. Invalid login. Contact administrator. I checked my bank app. Locked out. My phone number had been removed from all verification systems. My email was no longer listed. It wasn't just the house anymore. They deleted me digitally. Molly sat beside me at the kitchen table, watching as I went down the list. Each failed login, another silent slap. I finally set the phone down and said, "They're trying to cut me off from my own name." She didn't ask what I'd done to deserve it. She just slid her laptop across the table. "Start from scratch," she said, "and screenshot everything." I opened a new email address, created a folder named Fraud and Evidence, and began recording every attempt, every timestamp, every screen that proved I'd once had access, and now didn't. I called my bank and froze my credit. I filed a complaint about unauthorized email access. I created passwords with 15 characters, stored them in 2 separate places. In my journal, I wrote, "She erased me online, but I'm not a ghost." That night, as the apartment settled into its familiar quiet, Molly handed me a portable drive she'd found in her desk drawer. "Just in case you don't trust the cloud anymore." I plugged it in and began uploading backup copies of everything I could find. Old spreadsheets, shared utilities, mortgage paperwork. Then, I found something I hadn't seen in years. An expense log from when the house was refinanced. Every major renovation listed under my name. My bank card, my time, proof. I added a new line in the timeline. Proof 215, Financial Foundation paper trail. I didn't sleep that night. I didn't need to. As dawn bled into the windowpane, I attached the encrypted folder to an email addressed to my legal contact. Subject line, Asset Interference, Preliminary File. The send button pulsed under my finger. I clicked it. "She locked me out," I said to no one, "but I've already walked in through the back door." The next attack wasn't on my passwords. It was on my face. I woke to the sharp buzz of a text from Molly, just as the sun barely peeked through the blinds of her spare bedroom. I rubbed my eyes, opened the message, and clicked the link she'd sent. It took me straight to Celine's business Instagram. There, front and center, was a post with a side-by-side image. The before photo was our childhood home's living room, cluttered, dated, and dimly lit. I was there, in the background, crouched near a box of tangled Christmas lights, mid-sentence, mouth open, hair pulled back in a lazy bun. Unflattering didn't even cover it. The after photo was bright, sterile, minimal. Celine stood posed like she'd just redesigned Versailles. The caption read, "Sometimes you have to let go of the dead weight to rebuild something that finally breathes." A punch in the gut would have been more subtle. The comments were worse. "Wow, night and day! That old version was such a mess. Some people don't want to evolve, and it shows." One user chimed in, "Pretty sure that's her sister in the old pic, no?" Celine replied, "Everyone has a past." I didn't comment. I didn't message. I took a screenshot. Then 3 more. Comments, timestamp, her reply. Sent them to my lawyer with a short message. "This is how she's branding me now." They thought it was clever. I thought it was evidence. Still, it stung. I stood up from the bed and walked to the bathroom, flicking on the light. My reflection didn't argue with what I felt. Tired. Tight-lipped. Not broken, but chipped. Later that afternoon, I walked to the library, hoping silence would help me breathe. I needed to focus, finish my timeline, track metadata, anything but sit in that post like an open wound. I passed 2 women chatting by the front desk. One said, "I heard Celine's mom was admitted last night." The other nodded. "ER took her in after dinner. Poor woman's been through a lot." I stopped. My skin went cold. "What hospital?" I asked before I could stop myself. They told me. I left without checking out the book I'd carried to the desk. I drove to Ridgeview Medical Center on autopilot, parked in the visitor lot, walked through those glass doors with legs that didn't feel like mine. At the nurse's station, I gave my name. She blinked. "We didn't think you were coming. The family said you were out of state." My jaw clenched. I nodded, said nothing. They led me to the end of the hall. Room 312. I stood outside the door, hands shaking slightly, heart pounding hard enough to hear. I didn't go in. I couldn't. Inside, I heard voices. My mother's soft, tired tone. And Celine's laughter, effortless, like nothing was out of place, like she hadn't deliberately locked me out of the one room I should have walked into first. I sat down on the hallway bench, closed my eyes. They didn't just cut me out. They wanted me to believe I'd never belonged, that the people who raised me had accepted my erasure like a clearance item, priced low, easy to discard. I don't remember how long I sat there. Eventually, I walked out of the hospital, across the parking lot, into my car. I didn't turn the engine on right away. I just opened the glove compartment, pulled out my folder, and flipped to the latest tab. I took a breath. Then I recorded a voice memo on my phone. They kept my mother from me. Now I'll let the law speak for me. That night, I sat at Molly's kitchen table and renamed the evidence folder on my computer. Evidence Package AA PDF. I typed the subject line of the email. Formal petition, contested probate filing. Clicked attach, clicked send. By the time they read that email, it was already too late to undo what they'd started. By the time they read that email, it was already too late to undo what they'd started. I didn't spend the next hours pacing. I didn't rehearse courtroom monologues in my head. I waited like a woman who had already been through the worst part, the erasure. Everything after that was paperwork and proof. Mark, my legal contact, called me just after 10 a.m. He didn't sound surprised, just grim. "She used your old passport scan," he said, "to authorize the transfers." My throat tightened. "What transfers?" "Multiple wire movements from the shared account you two once opened for house expenses, all routed to a luxury escrow account under her name. It's not just inheritance now, Thalassa. This crosses into financial fraud." I let the silence speak for me. He added, "I've filed an emergency motion. You won't have to say much. The evidence will do the talking." That suited me fine. I'd been quiet for years. I knew exactly how to weaponize that now. I hung up and poured a glass of water. The world outside Molly's apartment moved normally. Cars passed, a delivery truck backed into a driveway. But inside me, there was stillness, sharp and focused. Around noon, I got a text from a former colleague. "Is this you?" Attached was a link. I clicked it. There, in full color, on Celine's new lifestyle rebrand campaign site, was my face. An old photo from a years ago branding shoot with Dorian, back when we were still building his photography portfolio. I'd sat for hours while he tested lighting setups, trying to be patient as he fumbled with a reflector. Now, that photo was labeled before, stuck, stressed, unsupported. Next to it, a radiant shot of Celine, fresh-faced, in a white blouse, leaning confidently against the same backdrop. After, aligned, empowered, self-made. I stared, open-mouthed. The caption below, "Your life can transform. You just have to choose." My jaw didn't drop. My heart didn't race. But something in my chest clicked. She had taken my image and turned it into her contrast. My skin, my eyes, my defeated expression used as the foil for her triumph. And Dorian? He'd let it happen. I filed a cease and desist that afternoon, attached the original licensing agreement from the shoot. He never owned the rights to use my image commercially. The subject of the photo was me. The camera was his. The copyright was shared. Mark added it to the civil complaint. The story started spreading faster than I expected. First, on a niche consumer advocacy blog. Then, a local news outlet ran a story. Family dispute turns public. Accusations of identity theft and brand manipulation surface in Sonoma. The headline underneath read, "Local woman erased from legacy fights back with receipts." Within hours, Celine's Instagram comments were locked. Donors began pulling support from her foundation. I got an anonymous message from someone at one of her board meetings. She's losing control. Keep going. I didn't reply. I didn't need the applause. This wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about remembering who I'd always been. Before they tried to write me out. Before they photoshopped me into a warning label for women like me who didn't fit the mold. That night, I walked to the diner down the block, ordered a slice of pie, and sat in the far corner near the TV. I wasn't hungry. I just needed to be among people who didn't know my story. The news was on. A hearing has been expedited for this Thursday at the Sonoma County Courthouse, the anchor said, involving local businesswoman Celine Marin and claims of misappropriated assets from a shared family trust. My name scrolled beneath in small but firm text. Thalassa Marin, petitioner. I finished my pie, left a tip on the counter, and stood. See you there, Celine, I whispered. I never expected to win the war that way, but sometimes all it takes is pulling the right thread. The courthouse didn't look different that morning, but it felt different. There were no crowds, no press at the door, just a few people standing outside, coffee in hand, exchanging glances and whispers. I walked past them without flinching. No makeup, no flashy coat, just me, in clean slacks and a dark sweater that didn't scream confidence, but didn't apologize either. Inside, the courtroom hummed with quiet tension. Mark was already seated at our table, files lined up like soldiers ready for battle. Across the aisle, Celine sat in her tailored navy suit, legs crossed, lips pinched tight. Her lawyer leaned toward her, whispering something she didn't respond to. The judge entered. We all stood. Then we all sat. Mark spoke first. Clear, composed. He laid out the timeline, the bank records, the signatures, the social media excerpts, the email headers. It wasn't just a case. It was a tapestry of manipulation. Celine didn't say a word. The judge asked questions, clarified points, listened longer than I expected. Then she spoke. The court grants the emergency motion. Assets will be frozen pending full review. The petitioner's name will be reinstated on all relevant trust documents, also pending review. The cease and desist on use of the petitioner's image is granted, effective immediately. There was no gasp, no outrage, just the quiet thud of the clerk stamping the verdict into permanence. When we exited the courtroom, Celine made a half-step toward me. I didn't stop walking. I didn't look back. By the time I reached the sidewalk, my inbox buzzed. A message from Dorian. I'm sorry, I should have said something earlier. I was afraid of her. I deleted it. Back at Molly's that afternoon, I scrolled through local news. The story was everywhere. Prominent nonprofit founder faces legal action from estranged sister. Donors were backing away fast. PR reps had gone quiet. The board issued a vague statement about reviewing internal practices. I didn't smile. Not yet. That evening, I visited Ridgeview again. My mother was sitting up in bed, IV still in her hand, a hospital tray untouched beside her. She looked at me the way someone looks at a dream they're not sure is real. I wish you had called me, I said quietly. Her voice was barely a breath. I wish I had too. We didn't hug, we didn't cry. But for the first time in years, something passed between us that wasn't performance. Not forgiveness, but recognition. The next few weeks moved quickly. Legal steps became standard. My name appeared back on paperwork, on records. Celine's presence in the foundation dwindled. She kept her house, but she lost the clean lines of her image. I wasn't trying to destroy her. I was just reclaiming what was mine. I moved into a small apartment downtown. Nothing fancy, just enough. I started teaching workshops twice a week. Know Your Paper, we called them. Financial literacy for women over 50. How to read contracts. How to protect your name. How to leave quietly, but effectively. We called the program the Undone Name Project. It wasn't flashy, it wasn't loud, but it was mine. One night, I pulled out the old family photo from the drawer I never opened anymore. The one from when I was 13. I looked at my face, so unsure, so eager to belong. I didn't frame it. I didn't post it. I just placed it back, gently. Maybe the point wasn't to get my seat back at their table. Maybe it was to build my own. Sometimes, the people who claim to love us the most are the ones who rewrite our stories without our consent. I learned, through pain and proof, that silence doesn't protect you. It only makes your erasure easier. You don't have to fight with fire to be heard. Sometimes, all it takes is paper, patience, and knowing the difference between being quiet and being invisible. If you've ever felt pushed out of your own life, or like your truth was too inconvenient for others, this story was for you. Now, I'd love to hear from you. Have you ever had to rebuild yourself from the ground up? Have you ever been erased from your own narrative? Leave a comment and tell me. Just type 1 if this story resonated with you, or share where you're watching from. And if it didn't land with you, I'd still like to know why. Let's keep the conversation real. If this video moved you, inspired you, or simply made you pause, don't forget to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next story. There's more to tell. And maybe it's your turn next.